Hi, I'm April, and for so long the only thing that I cared about was to feel closer to my older sister, Bethany. She is 3 years older than me and has always been someone I've looked up to. She got a lot of B's in school and had lots of extracurricular activities like hockey and dance clubs. My parents were always so proud of her, and I knew when I grew up I wanted to be just like her. Except I wasn't. I did better than Beth at school, but my social skills sucked. Every time I tried to play with her and her older friends, they made fun of me for being bad at it. It embarrassed Beth. I think that's why she stopped inviting me in the end. As the years went on, we grew apart, especially when Beth was in high school and I was still in middle school. I hated it. I wanted to spend more time with her. I wanted to make her proud of me, but I didn't know how. One day, I snuck into Beth's room when she was at a friend's house and I tried on some of her clothes. Soon after, I spotted her makeup box. When I reached for the tubes of lipsticks, I found a bright red one and I wanted to know what I'd look like with red lips like the women in the movies. So I tried it and, oh my god, I broke it. I pressed it too hard and it snapped. The red stick fell down my chest and onto my lap, staining Beth's purple t-shirt I was wearing. I panicked and took everything off and tried to hide the t-shirt and the lipstick. My heart was pounding when Beth got home from her friend's house. I knew she'd noticed straight away things had been moved around, and I was completely right. I don't think we'd ever fought like that before. I was so sad that I cried all night. I couldn't believe it. After that, I stopped trying to be her friend, and we almost never talked. So when Beth called me into her room one evening, I was shocked. I couldn't believe she wanted to talk to me, and I was just so excited that I didn't think much about it when I went in there after her. It wasn't until she sat me down and looked at me with a serious stare that I began to worry. Was she mad at me again? I hadn't done anything. We only spoke to each other at breakfast and dinner. Maybe I said something she wasn't happy with. Beth started to look sad. What's wrong? I asked. I have a boyfriend, Beth admitted with a small smile. She took my hand in hers and clasped it tight. He invited me to a party he's having tonight, but Mum and Dad have this stupid curfew and they would never let me go on a school night. I really want to see him, April. I didn't understand why she was telling me this. We don't share secrets since we were little, but I was happy. Maybe she wanted to become closer again. I wish I could help, Beth. That really sucks, I said. Well, you can help, she told me and pulled me closer. There's something you can do for me so I can go. What is that? I asked, feeling confused. If you sleep in my room for me under the covers, then when Mum and Dad come to check, they'll think it's me in here, she explained. I shook my head. What if they check my room? Beth rolled her eyes. They never check your room. They know what a good girl you are. I was torn. I wanted to help her, but I didn't want to betray my parents. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just sat in silence and thought about the options. That is until Beth pulled me closer and cuddled me. Please, April, I really need you, Beth begged, and I couldn't help but give in. Of course, I'll always be here to help you, I told her with a smile, but inside I was worried. I didn't want to get in trouble, and I didn't want my parents to be upset with me. As long as I was quiet, it would be okay though, right? When 8 p.m. came, Beth snuck out of the window and waved me goodbye as I curled up under her covers. I took my Kindle in with me to read until I fell asleep, but I couldn't. Inside, my brain was whirling with thoughts and worries, and after an hour it became clear there would be no sleep for me until Beth got home. At 9 p.m, I heard my mum come in the door to check on Beth. She moved around and picked up some laundry from the floor before she left again, and I let out a sigh of relief. Now, Beth had said she would get home around midnight, so I just had to wait. But as time passed, I checked the clock on the wall and realised with horror that 12 a.m. had come and gone. It was actually past 1 a.m. by then. I sat up in bed horrified and I started to panic. I tried to call her on the phone several times, but no answer. Her phone was off and I became even more horrified. I don't have her boyfriend's contact information. Oh my god, what do I do? After a few minutes, I ran to my parents' room with tears streaming down my face. When I woke them up, they were both really confused. I confessed everything to them through my sobs and they sprung into action. My dad drove around town looking for my sister and my mum called the local hospitals. I sat frozen as I realised Beth could truly be in huge danger right now. By lying for her, I'd put her life in danger. I was devastated. Finally, Beth was found in a hospital in the next town. All three of us raced there to be at her bedside. My parents were too worried and felt shocked when they found out that she'd been taken in for alcohol poisoning and needed her stomach pumped. I blamed myself all the time she was there and cried non-stop. When I entered Beth's room in the hospital, I was sure she'd yell at me for blowing the whole thing over, but I didn't care. I was so worried about her and I wanted her to know how I felt. Before I said a word, Beth held my hand and told me that before being rushed to the hospital, she felt for a moment that she was going to die. At that moment, she could think of only me and our parents. Beth hugged me and I didn't want to let go. The next day when we left the hospital and my parents were positive Beth was fine, they decided it's time to tell us we're both grounded. But we couldn't care any less. We laughed and apologized for what we did. I learned from this incident that people sometimes know who they truly love and what they deeply care about when they think they are not going to see them anymore.
Hi, my name's Allison, and when I was just 5 years old, my mom passed away. For years, it was just me and my dad. We would go on adventures every weekend together, hiking in the nearby mountains, camping in the forest, reading books together in our backyard. We were like best friends. But then one day, everything changed. My dad met Sylvia. Pretty soon after, Sylvia and her daughter Elsie moved in, and we became one big happy family. Not. I mean, okay, when my dad asked me how I felt about it all, I just smiled and said, "I'm happy if you are." I don't normally tell lies, but he really did look so happy, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Even when he asked her to marry him, I baked a cake to celebrate and tried my hardest to be okay with it. It wasn't so bad when they first moved in. Dad is a bit messy, so it was nice to have some other females around the house to help out a bit. And Sylvia is super organized, so she really took control and did the house up. It looked great. But then it started to get a bit much. Elsie complained that my room was bigger than hers, so Dad agreed to break down my wall, making my room smaller than hers. I tried to tell him that wasn't fair. It was my house first. But Dad just said we need to keep everyone happy. Dad works at the university, and sometimes he has to work late. I don't know when it started, but one day, Sylvia just began treating me differently. On the nights Dad was at work, she'd say it was my turn to cook, and she always made me help Elsie with her homework, saying that I was lucky to be so smart and that I should share my smartness with my sister. I started to dread nights alone with them, as they had already started to gang up on me. One night, I was in the bath, and I heard them laughing nearby. I quickly dried off and tiptoed out into the hall. I could see them through the crack in the door of my dad's study. They were looking at old photos of my mom and saying she was ugly, and what had my dad been thinking when he had married someone like that? Elsie kept saying how much more beautiful Sylvia was than my mom. I couldn't bear hearing this. And then I heard Sylvia saying that she had taken $400 from my dad to buy a new handbag, but she didn't even tell him. I was getting more annoyed. My dad wasn't doing that well financially, and we don't usually buy expensive clothes or bags. The next thing I heard was glass smashing. I ran into the study, almost dropping my towel on the way. When they saw me, they quickly jumped up and said they'd heard a crash and come running in. On the floor was the framed photo of my mom and dad on their wedding day, and one of us as a family of 3. The glass was smashed and the photos were slightly creased. They were lying to me. They had knocked them off the shelf. I looked at them both with tears in my eyes and ran to my room. As soon as my dad got home, I told them everything they'd said and done. Dad didn't believe me at all and said accidents happen and that Sylvia would never be so cruel to say something like that about Mom. He kept saying how Sylvia loves me and thinks the world of me. The next few weeks just got worse. They started teasing me about my skin. I'd recently got a few pimples, and I felt so self-conscious about them. Elsie even said that I'm dirty, and that's why I have so many pimples and no date for the school dance. That day, it happened to be my dad's birthday, so I was making his favorite meal. While I was cooking, Sylvia started shouting at me to clean up her toenails that she'd just cut. They were all over the floor. And then she said I needed to hurry up so I could write Elsie's history paper for tomorrow. I said I was busy, and couldn't Elsie do it by herself? Then she started screaming at me so much that she actually threw her cup of boiling hot tea at me. I crouched onto the floor, and thankfully it missed me by an inch. I was still shocked when she started shouting at me louder and saying she doesn't understand why I'm in her life and that she doesn't even love my father anymore. At that exact moment, my dad walked through the door. He saw me cowering by the stove and Sylvia marching towards me with her arms raised. He looked straight at Sylvia and said at the top of his voice, "Stop!" Turns out, he'd come home early to surprise us for his birthday. And when he'd heard Sylvia bossing me around, he'd hid around the door listening. Sylvia burst into tears and said she didn't mean it, she was having a bad day, and it was just a big misunderstanding. Before she could even finish, my dad came towards me and gave me a huge hug. He apologized to me for not believing me. And then he turned to Sylvia. He ordered her to pack her and Elsie's stuff and get out of his house immediately. She was hysterical by then and was begging to stay. But my dad said he was done. He would be filing the divorce papers as soon as possible. Then he turned back to me, gave me a kiss on my head, and said this was turning out to be the best birthday he'd had in years. Finally, it was just me and my dad again.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm just like every other girl my age, except for one thing. And, well, that's what I want to talk to you about today. I'm 16 years old and, okay, I don't really know how to put this. I'm ugly. Not like hideously ugly, but I'm no beauty queen. My mom's a beauty queen, though. Well, at least she was when she was younger. She was the beauty queen of our state, but now she just helps run the beauty pageant. And she looks wonderful for her age. She's super slim and has long, straight hair. Ever since I was a little girl, she's always tried to make me look prettier. She used to buy me expensive pink frilly dresses and tie my frizzy hair up in cute polka dot hair bows, but she still never seemed satisfied. She never registered me into the cutest baby competitions and never even let me participate in any of her beauty pageants. I mean, it's not as if I even want to take part, but she's my mom and she runs it. She could at least ask if I want to join, right? Or at least invite me to attend. For my 13th birthday, she bought me a makeup set and said I should start wearing makeup every day if I ever want to have a chance at being successful. Can you believe it? A few of the girls in my year at school are participating in the upcoming pageant, and their moms are there at every rehearsal cheering them on. My mom's there too, of course, seeing as she's in charge of it. One day, my friend Marissa asked me to come over to her place after school. As we walked out of the school gates, her mom came running over to us, telling her she'd be late for the special beauty pageant ceremony. She'd completely forgotten it was today. I told her I'd just see her at school tomorrow, but her mom insisted I come along too. I knew my mom was the guest speaker at this ceremony, and I'd offered to come along and support her, but she went really quiet when I said that and told me I should probably just stay at home and do my homework. I didn't argue with her because she really didn't seem to want me to come. I got in the car with Marissa and her mom and decided that maybe my mom was being modest and would secretly love me to be there. As we arrived at the venue, Marissa headed backstage to join the other beauty queen contestants, and I took a seat in the front row with Marissa's mom. Before my mom was due to go on stage, she came out to check that everything was in order, and that's when she spotted me. I waved and smiled at her, but she didn't wave back. She looked upset with me. She asked me what I was doing here and why I wasn't at home. She told me to go wait in the car or I'd be in big trouble. I didn't even reply to her. It didn't seem worth the fight. I grabbed my bag and said bye to Marissa's mom before running off. Marissa's mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. An hour later, my mom climbed into the car and we drove home in silence. I went straight to my room and locked the door. I just felt so alone. My mom came to my room and I opened my door because I thought maybe she wanted to apologize. But instead, she said she'd booked me an appointment with Dr. Reynolds to see if he could fix my face, and with Dr. Smith to discuss my diet. Again, I didn't even argue. I'd just given up. It had been like this my whole life. The next day, we sat in Dr. Reynolds' office, and he looked at me in confusion. He asked my mom why on earth we were here. He looked at me and said I have one of the most beautiful faces he has ever seen, and that there's nothing that needs alterations on my face. My mom interrupted him and said she thinks I am ugly and that it's affecting my school life and my social life. When I heard her words, I ran out of Dr. Reynolds' office and burst into tears. Why was my mom so cruel? Why couldn't I have a mom like Marissa's? As I sat with my head in my hands, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up and it was my mom. I wanted to hit her, I felt so upset. But then, before I could even push her away, she started crying. She told me that she could accept the fact that she is not the highlight of any show anymore, and that she let me believe I am ugly and didn't make me join her recent events, because whenever I do, everyone looks at me, gives me compliments, and ignores her. She was crying more bitterly now, and said I steal her thunder, and she was so insecure of losing all the attention she used to get when she was younger. Then she scooped me into her arms and hugged me tight. We both cried. She looked me in the eyes and said she is very sorry. She asked me if I could ever forgive her. Understanding that all this time she'd just been projecting her own feelings onto me, and that I wasn't ugly, nor was she, made me feel a bit better. I felt sad for my mom, but I was glad she finally realized the problem and became aware of it. Leaving the hospital, my mom looked at me and said I am the most beautiful girl she knows. That sentence changed my life.